Stop everything you are doing right now. Put the phone face down, close every other tab, and clear the next 20 minutes of your life, because what Remy Ma just did to the Breakfast Club is not a news story. It is a public execution of an entire media empire, and the most chilling detail is that she pulled the trigger with a smile on her face. This is the coldest chess move hip-hop has witnessed in a decade, and I am telling you right now with my whole chest that not a single channel covering this saga has explained what actually happened. They describe the smoke. Nobody shows you the fire. The timeline is screaming about the wrong thing as usual. Who snapped? Who looked pressed? Whether Papoose was watching, whether Claressa Shields felt the temperature drop 10 degrees in one afternoon. That conversation is loud, it is entertaining, and it is completely beside the point, because while everybody is staring up at the fireworks, the real detonation went off in the basement of the building, and it cracked a load-bearing wall this entire industry is standing on. Tonight I am taking you down there step by step, room by room. By the time we climb back up, you will understand why media executives were making panicked calls over a podcast booking. Let me set the table properly, because if you missed even a fragment of this saga, the rest of tonight will feel like walking into the final 5 minutes of a movie you never watched. Remy Ma, the Bronx's own, the first lady of the second act, a woman who carries herself with a stillness that people twice her level of fame have never been able to purchase, finally gave the culture the conversation it had been demanding for the better part of a year. Months of murmurs. A marriage to Papoose that once read like a fairy tale, then slowly read like court filings. A side storyline involving Claressa Shields that refused to stay buried no matter how many times the internet shoveled dirt on top of it. Every blog wanted her voice. Every comment section wanted receipts. Every group chat wanted the moment. And here is where your jaw should hit the floor. The Breakfast Club had it. The exclusive. The lights. The 2 decades of history. Charlamagne the God and DJ Envy had more equity with Remy Ma than any other room in American media. They were the obvious destination, the natural home, the safest bet on the entire board. And they fumbled it. Not a small fumble either. I am talking about a goal line, championship on the clock, entire country watching fumble. And the wildest detail of all? It was not an accident. It was a choice. They reached for a check instead of a coronation. They chose to be slick at the exact moment the culture was begging them to be solid. And once you understand why they made that choice, every other piece of this story rearranges itself. So lock in with me before we go 1 inch deeper. Do not skim this. Do not half listen while you stir a pot or fold laundry. Because the angle I am carrying tonight is one none of these other pages have dared to touch. The rest of the internet is arguing about the curtains. I am here to show you the foundation, and what is cracked down there is bigger, colder, and frankly more brilliant than anybody wants to admit out loud. Start with the so-called mistake because it was never just a mistake. The Netflix maneuver was a confession wearing a business suit. Think about what a paywall actually does to a cultural moment. When a genuine event lands on a free platform, it does not behave like content, it behaves like weather. People are stitching it, quote posting it, screen recording it, arguing about it at 2 in the morning. The interview stops being one interview and becomes 50,000 tiny ones, each with its own pulse and second life. That reaction ecosystem is the real product. The sit-down is only the match. But the second you strike that match inside a locked streaming vault, the fire never catches. No clip wars. No midnight reaction videos. No group chats combusting in real time. Just silence, and in the attention business, silence is not neutral. Silence is fatal. The Breakfast Club knew this. Every executive in that building has watched 100 paywalled events suffocate on arrival. And they did it anyway. Which tells you the decision was never about strategy. It was about a building that had quietly stopped believing it was still the sun in the solar system, cashing out the brand before the brand finished cooling. And that is where this stops being a business blunder and becomes a transfer of power. Because while the Breakfast Club was backpedaling, dumping extended cuts onto YouTube in a panic, clawing at relevance with everything it had, Remy Ma made the move that rewrote the entire playbook in a single afternoon. Remy Ma did not beg for the seat. Remy Ma did not launch a redemption tour to clean up somebody else's rollout. She simply got up and walked. She walked over to Joe and Jada, to a room run by artists, by people who knew her when the cameras were off, by hosts who had shared studio floors and hard years with her long before there was a headline to harvest. And the moment her frame hit that seat, the entire balance of power in hip-hop media tilted on its axis. You could feel it in your pocket. The gatekeepers woke up and the gates were gone. Because the kingmaker was never the platform. The kingmaker was the trust. And trust does not trend. It just accumulates quietly, until the day it decides everything. Now let me talk about the part the entire internet misread, because this is where Remy Ma went from headline to masterclass. Everybody was braced for the explosion. The appetite was shameless. People wanted the scorched earth special. They wanted Papoose dragged by his collar. They wanted Claressa Shields read for filth with dates, timestamps, and subtitles. That is the meal the algorithm had been drooling over for months. And what did Remy Ma serve instead? Composure. Measured, elegant, almost surgical composure, the kind that requires more muscle than rage ever will. She let her presence do the work a meltdown was supposed to do. And in doing that, Remy Ma pulled off something this culture almost never witnesses. She made calm look like a threat. Listen carefully, because this is the lesson buried under everything else tonight. The coldest revenge is never the clapback. The coldest revenge is the climb. It is ascending so far above the noise that the people who tried to bury you have to squint just to figure out where you went. Remy Ma never went to war with Claressa Shields. She made Claressa Shields irrelevant to the conversation. Remy Ma never went to war with Papoose. She steered every camera toward her catalog, her platform, her future. Lions do not hold press conferences about barking dogs. They just keep walking toward ground the dogs cannot reach. And this is where the real story finally ignites, because every other page covering this saga is stuck on personalities. Who said what? Who won the exchange? Nobody is discussing the architecture. Nobody is saying the plain truth out loud. We just watched a live transfer of power in hip-hop media. The old guard, the morning show monopoly, the syndicated institutions that spent 15 years deciding whose moment got crowned and whose got buried, that entire apparatus just got outmaneuvered in public by an artist-led podcast with a smaller studio and a bigger bond. That is the headline, the story of the year wearing a gossip costume. The Breakfast Club did not lose an interview. The Breakfast Club lost its position in the sky. And in this business, position in the sky is the only currency that has ever truly mattered. Let me make this personal so the weight lands properly. Imagine spending 15 years building a brand, 15 years of alarm clocks before sunrise, 15 years of relationships nurtured, fences mended, hands shaken and watched. And then, with one casual decision, one decision greased by a streaming check and a glossy rebrand, you hand away the single asset that made you matter. You hand away the crowd. The live, arguing, laughing, furious, gorgeous crowd. And here is the brutal truth about crowds. They never send a sympathy note. They just relocate. That is exactly what happened. And the truly painful part? The building still does not fully grasp it. They are out here trying to fix a structural collapse with extended clips and fresh graphics. You cannot paint over a cracked support beam. You can only stand in front of it and hope nobody leans on the wall. Now, Claressa Shields and Papoose. I know a chunk of you pressed play tonight specifically for this, so let me be plain. The entire arc of that situation has been one of the strangest pieces of public theater I have ever covered. You had a person standing outside a marriage speaking with the authority of somebody holding the deed to it. Updates on the separation. Commentary on the timeline. Indirect little jabs wrapped in glittery captions. Receipts that wilted the moment anyone held them near a light. Statements contradicting earlier statements, corrected by later statements that contradicted the corrections. And hovering over all of it, a marriage that, on paper, was never even legally settled in the way the internet kept narrating it. That is not a love triangle. That is a fog machine. And a whole lot of people walk straight into the fog because the fog had flattering lighting. Sit with this question because nobody else is asking it plainly. How does a person outside a marriage issue press releases about the inside of it? Where does that math come from? Since when does proximity equal authorship? Since when does standing next to a story make you the writer of it? Because that is the quiet move that occurred. And the platforms that should have asked the obvious question on day one instead extended a microphone and said, run with it, spice it up, make it clickable. And every click was a small cut on Remy Ma's name. Multiply one small cut by 12 straight months of coverage and you finally understand why the air around this woman got so heavy. But here is the pivot that deserves a standing ovation. She never picked up the wound and wore it like a name tag. She never let the dragging become her introduction. And in a culture that pays you a bonus for bleeding in public, choosing to heal in private is an act of open rebellion. She rebelled by getting busier. She rebelled by getting sharper. She rebelled by sitting down with people who actually love her and talking about the music, the mission, the family, the next chapter, entirely on her own terms. She starved the machine of the one meal it had been begging for. And that choice, that single creative decision, is the move I need every one of you studying tonight. Because if you have ever been lied on, whispered about, watched strangers build a fantasy on top of your real life, the instruction manual is sitting right there in front of you. Do not feed it. Outgrow it. Do not fight the fog. Build something so bright the fog burns off on its own. Widen the lens with me now because there is another layer to this that almost nobody has touched. The Breakfast Club stumble is not an isolated incident. It is a battle in a war that is already underway. Hip-hop media is in the middle of a quiet civil war. On one side, the legacy platforms, the syndicated morning machines, the corporately funded studios, the personalities who minted their fame in a previous decade and never once updated the blueprint. On the other side, the new wave Joe and Jada, drink champs, the artist-run rooms with smaller followings but fanatical, ride-or-die audiences, rooms where nobody has to cook up controversy because the talk itself is heavy enough. And what Remy Ma did by walking out of the legacy tower and into the artist-built house was ring a bell that cannot be unrung. The safest place for the most important conversation is no longer the place with the biggest antenna. That is not a trending topic. That is a fault line moving. A generational handoff wearing the costume of a scheduling choice. And mark my words, history is going to rewind to this exact week, this Remy Ma interview, this fumbled exclusive, this silent stroll across the hallway, and file it as a hinge moment. The same way the Joe Budden podcast kicked the first door open. The same way Drink Champs redefined what a long-form sit-down could feel like. This is the next chapter of that same book. And the people sleeping through it are going to wake up 2 years from now wondering when somebody changed the rulebook. The rulebook got rewritten this week. You simply had to be looking in the right direction. There is one more layer I refuse to skip because it might be the most overlooked detail of the entire saga, the performance angle. Word has been circling that Remy Ma might not just talk in this interview. She might rap. Bars. Real booth heat. A sit-down that mutates into an event you cannot find anywhere else. And if that is real, understand what it actually is. That is not an interview anymore, that is a coronation. That is an artist announcing out loud, "I will not let a gossip headline do the talking when my pen is the deadliest thing in the building." That is Remy Ma reclaiming the pen on her own biography. If you want to know Remy Ma, you have to meet Remy Ma in her element, on her beat, doing the thing that built the name before anybody dared to drag it. Imagine the pressure in that room when she steps toward the microphone. That is not content. That is cinema. And do not insult her intelligence by pretending the record selection would be an accident. If she performs, and the whispers say the record in question is the one that side-eyes the entire side-piece storyline, that is not music anymore. That is a closing argument delivered over drums. The second that record breathes in that room, the debate is finished. The music gets the final word. And the music has never lost. So where does this leave the Breakfast Club? I am not here to dance on anybody's legacy. That platform built something real. That platform gave this culture moments we will reference for decades. But I am absolutely here to be honest, because honesty is the only reason you are on this channel instead of somewhere softer. The trust account has been drained past zero. When you share years of history with an artist and that artist hands the defining interview of her year to somebody else's camera, that is not a scheduling conflict. That is a verdict. That is the loyalty balance sheet getting read out in front of the whole neighborhood. And once the audience hears a verdict, no pile of bonus clips and after-the-fact apologies washes that out fast. The climb back is slow, unglamorous, knee-scraping work, and the open question is whether the egos involved can bend low enough to do it. And understand, this pattern is older than every name in tonight's story. Every era of this culture has a power transfer the outgoing kings never saw coming. There was a decade when the video countdowns decided who broke. Then the syndicated radio booths seized the scepter. Then the mixtape DJs ran off with it. Then the blog snatched it from the mixtape DJs. Then the timeline swallowed the blogs whole. And every single time, the rulers of the dying era stood there looking betrayed, swearing the people had turned on them. Audiences are not disloyal. Audiences flow toward honesty like a river cutting around a dead tree. The network never owned the crown. The network only owned the spotlight, and the spotlight belongs to whoever the artist is willing to stand under. The second she steps out of the beam is just electricity. That is what is happening right now, in real time, while some of these platforms are still polishing the lighting rig. Let me circle back to Remy Ma one more time, because I want the respect to land exactly where it belongs. What she did was not merely smart. It was restorative. It is the kind of play that women, black women most of all, the ones navigating a business that monetizes their suffering, will be screenshotting, quoting, and teaching in their group chats for the next decade. She proved you do not have to raise your voice to command a room. You do not have to answer an accusation to defeat it. You can simply outwork the narrative until the narrative starves. Outbuild it. Outclimb it. Write a chapter so strong the previous one reads like a misprint. That is not maturity. That is mastery. And mastery is the thing this culture rewards the least and remembers the longest. And while I have your attention, let me talk straight to every person watching tonight who has stayed quiet while strangers drag their name through hallways they have never even walked through. Proof does not need you to chase it. The truth has a way of clawing up to the surface on its own clock. You do not owe the internet a performance of your innocence. You do not have to audition for people who already cast you as the villain in a film you never agreed to shoot. Keep laying bricks in the dark. Keep clocking in while the cameras chase somebody else's scandal. Because sooner or later, and this is physics, not positivity, the weight of what you built crushes the weight of what they said. The people who tried to author your biography end up reduced to footnotes in a book they never wrote. Slow. Unspectacular. Permanent. That revenge has a perfect record. Let me put one more piece of evidence on the board, because the timeline has been snitching on itself for a year. Pull up the last 12 months of coverage and actually study it. Count how many times Remy Ma's name got invoked while Remy Ma was barely speaking in public at all. Notice how her cadence, her aesthetic, her whole brand language kept echoing out of people in her orbit who were not her. Watch the photo shoots. Read the captions. Track how a certain narrative would mysteriously resurface 48 hours before a certain announcement needed oxygen. Line those dots up and it stops looking like coincidence, it starts looking like a stage play. And here is the fatal flaw in any stage play built on somebody else's silence. The production only survives while she stays quiet. The second she opens her mouth in the right room, seated next to the right people, the entire set comes crashing down on the actors. That collapse is what you are watching right now live, whether the timeline has figured it out yet or not. And there is one more tell I have not seen a single channel unpack. Watch how the temperature flips the instant the spotlight rotates back onto the media circle itself. There are documented moments, plenty of them, where personalities on these exact platforms turn visibly tight, visibly irritated, visibly defensive the second curiosity wanders toward their own front porch. The same hosts who could excavate a stranger's marriage with forensic enthusiasm suddenly discover a deep respect for privacy. That is not a quirk. That is the operating system. The shovel only digs in one direction. The empathy only flows one way. And once an audience registers that imbalance, trust does not grow back with graphics, rebrands, or apology tours. It grows back with years of unglamorous repair, or it does not grow back at all. So where does tonight leave us? At a fork in the road. The old model of hip-hop media, a handful of platforms deciding whose voice mattered and on what terms, is cracking straight down the middle. The new model, artists choosing their own rooms, loyalty as the currency, the conversation migrating to wherever the trust lives, is coming online whether the gatekeepers approve or not. The Remy Ma interview is simply the loudest public proof so far. It will not be the last. Watch who walks where over the next 12 months. Watch which platforms land the exclusives and which ones get sent straight to voicemail. The industry map is being redrawn in real time, and half the press is still steering by last year's map. I want the comments tonight to be a real conversation, not a food fight. So here is what I am asking you. 1. Do you honestly believe the Breakfast Club can recover from this? Or is this the opening chapter of a slow dissolve into elevator music? 2. Is Remy Ma choosing Joe and Jada over the legacy seat going to inspire a whole line of artists behind her? And if so, who do you think walks next? 3. Is the era of the morning show kingmaker officially over? Or is there one final lap left in it? And the question that matters most to me personally, did Remy Ma just set a brand new standard for how an artist responds when their private life gets turned into public sport? Drop your real answers below. I read everything. I respond. And the coldest takes in that comment section are getting featured in the follow-up. And before I let you go, one last thing to plant because I want it taking root in your mind hours after this video ends. Start paying attention to who stays quiet. The people shouting the hardest are almost always the ones who know the least. The folks screaming about somebody else's marriage, somebody else's money, somebody else's choices are usually screaming because volume is the only currency they hold. The quiet ones, the ones laying bricks while the timeline amuses itself, those are the ones worth watching. Remy Ma moved in silence. Remy Ma built in silence. Remy Ma plotted in silence. And then she made one single move and shifted an entire industry without ever raising her volume. In a culture hooked on volume, the ones who weaponize silence are about to own everything. Think about how radical that actually is. We live in a time where every feeling has to become a post. Every disagreement has to become a thread. Every wound has to become content before it even scabs over. And inside that climate, the person who processes privately, plans privately, and speaks publicly only when the moment is ripe is broadcasting on a channel most people do not even have the equipment to pick up. They are not competing in the volume Olympics. They are running a marathon while everybody else sprints for likes. And the marathon always wins, it just declines to go viral while it is winning. That is the trade. Burn bright today and vanish, or build today and become immovable. Remy Ma chose immovable, and tonight the whole culture is staring at the invoice. Everything in this business has always reduced to a single question. Who controls the light the artist is willing to stand in? For decades that light was a magazine cover. Then it was a radio booth. Then it was a morning show. And every time the light moved, the previous owners acted ambushed, as if the audience had committed some unforgivable betrayal. The audience never betrays. The audience flows toward honesty like a river finding the lowest ground. Right now that honest water is pooling in artist-run rooms, not corporate studios. That is not personal. That is current. You can curse the current. You can pretend the current is a rumor. You cannot swim against it forever. The smart move for the legacy side is humility and slow repair. The losing move is pretending the beam still shines the way it did 5 years ago. Spoiler, it does not. And every artist watching this fumble is taking notes for the day they face the same fork. If this breakdown hit you in a different place than the usual gossip does, do 3 things for me right now. Hit that like button. Subscribe and tap the bell because the follow-up to this story, Who I Believe Walks Next, and why the pieces start toppling twice as fast from here, is already loading and you want to be inside this building when it drops. And send this to the one friend who still thinks this was a messy celebrity spat, the one who cannot see that the ground underneath the entire industry just moved. Shake them awake for me. Final thing, and I want you to hear it at half speed. People will talk about you. People will twist you. People will build entire business models on top of half-truths about you and eat off them for a whole season. None of that is your job. Your job is to become impossible to ignore. So welded to your craft, your family, your purpose, and your peace that the gossip eventually runs out of places to stick. Remy Ma just gave a public seminar in what impossible to ignore looks like. Study it. Apply it. And the next time somebody tries to author your life without your permission, smile, get back to work, and let the lion handle what lions handle. Rise so high the doubters have to invent a brand new language just to describe your ceiling. That is the play. That is the lesson. That is all for tonight. I will see you in the next one. Stay solid. Stay silent where it counts. Stay impossible to ignore.